I was 20 years old when this happened. I was working the overnight shift at a small gas station just outside my town in rural Kentucky. It wasn't a dangerous area by any means, just a quiet stretch of road that connected two small towns, the kind of place where you knew most of the regulars by name. And the most exciting thing that usually happened was someone coming in at 1 a.m. for a bag of chips and a Gatorade. The store sat off a long, empty road that barely had any traffic after midnight. The nearest sheriff's station was a good 7 or 8 minutes away. Most nights it was just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. It was a rainy Thursday night in late October. The roads were slick and empty, and the rain was coming down in a steady, constant sheet against the windows. I'd been on shift since 10, and by 2 in the morning I was just going through the motions, restocking shelves, wiping down counters, checking my phone between the occasional customer. Nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering. That changed at around 2:15 in the morning when an old dark SUV pulled slowly into the lot. I noticed it immediately because of where it parked. Not near the pumps, not near the front entrance. It rolled all the way to the far edge of the property, almost at the tree line, and stopped there facing the building. Engine still running, headlights still on. I stood behind the counter and watched through the glass, expecting the door to open and someone to walk in. Nobody did. A full minute passed, then 2, then 5. The SUV just sat there, idling, pointed directly at the store. I told myself it was nothing. Someone on a phone call. Someone waiting to pick up a friend. People do weird things at 2 a.m., and most of the time there's a completely boring explanation. I went back to wiping down the counter and kept checking the window out of the corner of my eye. Another customer came in around 2:20, paid for gas, and left. The SUV was still there when they pulled out. Then it moved, slowly. It rolled out of the far spot and repositioned closer to the building. Still no one got out. It just sat there in the new spot, engine running, and I realized I had stopped pretending not to watch. I grabbed the mop and started mopping the floor near the window, so I had a reason to be standing there. I was watching the vehicle's reflection in the glass when the driver door finally opened. A tall man got out, gray hoodie, hood down, hands in his pockets. He walked toward the entrance slowly, pushed the door open, and came inside. He didn't go to the drink coolers. He didn't look at the snack aisle. He didn't pick anything up or look around the store the way people do when they're trying to decide what they want. He walked in a straight line directly to the counter and stopped in front of me. He looked at me for a second, and then he said, quietly, "You here alone tonight?" I told him no. I said my coworker was in the back doing inventory. It came out more naturally than I expected, like something I had rehearsed without knowing it. He smiled. It was a small smile, barely there. He glanced toward the back hallway, and then looked back at me and said, "You shouldn't lie to people working this late." Then he turned around and walked out without buying a single thing. I watched him get back into the SUV. I was waiting for him to pull out of the lot and disappear down the road. He didn't. Instead, the SUV moved again, slowly rolling around the side of the building toward the back, into the area where our dumpsters were, the area where the cameras didn't fully reach. I locked the front doors right then. I didn't care that we were technically still open. I hit the lock and stood in the middle of the store and felt how bright everything was inside versus how dark it was out there, and I did not like that feeling at all. 10 minutes passed. Then I heard it. Not a knock. A bang, hard and loud against the employee entrance at the back of the building. One bang, then a pause, then 2 more. I didn't move. I stood completely still behind the counter and did not make a sound. The banging stopped, and then, slowly, the back door handle moved downward. Whoever it was testing whether it was locked. It was. The handle returned to its normal position, and everything went quiet. I called the police while standing behind the counter, with my eyes on both the front and back of the store. While I was on the phone, I saw a flashlight beam moving slowly along the back wall outside, sweeping past the dumpsters and toward the employee entrance. I stayed on the line and did not hang up until I saw the patrol car pull into the lot. By the time officers arrived, the SUV was gone. They searched the property and the surrounding area and found nothing. But one of the officers came back in and told me they'd found muddy boot prints directly behind the building, leading up to and stopping right outside the employee entrance. Fresh ones, recent enough that the rain hadn't washed them out yet. I finished that shift because I didn't know what else to do. I quit that job less than a month later. I still think about what he meant when he told me I shouldn't lie to people working this late. I've never been able to fully convince myself it was just something random he said. This happened a couple of years ago when I was working night audit at a mid-sized hotel right off the interstate outside of Nashville. The job was simple: check in late arrivals, run the nightly reports, answer the phone, keep the lobby looking presentable. Most nights the hardest part was staying awake. My coworker on the evening shift clocked out at 11, and after that it was just me until 7 in the morning. 8 hours alone in a lobby with automatic sliding doors and a parking lot that stayed mostly empty after 2 a.m. I had been doing it for about 4 months, and the routine was so established that I had stopped noticing the details of the job. It was background, just something I moved through until the sun came up. Around 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, I was sitting behind the desk working through the nightly report when the automatic doors slid open and a man walked in. I noticed right away that he had no luggage, no bag, nothing in his hands. He was soaked from the rain outside, his jacket dark with it, and he moved quickly to the desk with his head slightly down. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that goes beyond a long drive. He asked if I had any rooms available. I told him I did and pulled up the system. While I was typing, I noticed he kept glancing over his shoulder toward the front windows, not casually, the way people do when they're waiting, deliberately, like he was watching for something specific. I asked for his ID. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled it out, but hesitated for just a second before handing it over, like he was making a decision about something. I took it and started entering his information. That's when I saw the figure outside. There was someone standing at the far edge of the parking lot, near the tree line, completely still, standing in the rain, facing the hotel entrance. I almost thought it was a shadow until I looked more carefully and saw the outline shift slightly. A person, just standing there. I looked back at the guest and I could tell immediately that he had noticed me see the figure. His jaw tightened. He leaned slightly closer to the desk and said quietly, "Don't let him know I'm here." I let out a small, awkward laugh because I didn't know what else to do. He didn't laugh back. He didn't smile. He just looked at me and waited. I looked back at the parking lot. The figure was walking now, slowly, directly toward the hotel entrance. I watched the automatic doors. The man at my counter watched them too. Neither of us said anything. The doors slid open. The second man walked into the lobby. He was shorter, wearing a dark jacket, and he didn't look at me right away. He looked around the lobby slowly, methodically, the way you look at a room when you're trying to find something specific without appearing to search for it. Then he looked at me and asked, "Anybody else come in here?" I realized in that moment that the first guest was no longer standing at the counter beside me. I turned, and he was gone. I hadn't heard him move, hadn't seen him step away, but the space where he had been standing was empty, and the hallway that led to the elevators was dark and still. The second man was watching me, waiting for my answer. The lobby was completely silent, except for the rain against the windows and the low hum of the ice machine down the hall. I looked at him, and I said no. Nobody had come in. He stood there for several more seconds looking at me, and I held eye contact because looking away felt like the wrong thing to do. Then he turned and walked back out through the automatic doors and disappeared into the parking lot. I called the police about 15 minutes later after I had tried and failed to locate the first guest anywhere in the building using the security cameras. The rain distortion on the parking lot cameras made it nearly impossible to see anything useful outside. Officers arrived and searched every floor, every stairwell, and every accessible room in the building. They found nothing. But one of the officers came back to the desk and told me the emergency exit near the ground floor stairwell had been propped open from the inside. A folded piece of cardboard had been wedged into the doorframe to keep it from latching. Whoever had done it wanted a way out that bypassed the lobby entirely. Someone had planned for that possibility before they ever walked through my front door. I stayed until the end of my shift because I genuinely didn't know what else to do. I stayed for 3 more weeks after that before I put in my notice. I still think about the moment the second man asked me if anyone had come in. I still think about the way he looked at me while he waited for my answer, and I still wonder, regularly, what would have happened if I had told him the truth. I was 24 when I took a part-time cleaning job at a large church in downtown Portland. The work was straightforward enough. I came in after evening services ended, usually around 9 or 9:30, and cleaned until everything was done, which typically put me leaving somewhere around midnight. The pay was decent for what it was, and I needed the hours, so I didn't complain much about being alone in a massive old building late at night. The church itself was enormous. Built sometime in the early 1900s, it had high vaulted ceilings, long dark hallways that connected the main sanctuary to the administrative offices, old stained glass windows that looked completely different at night than they did during the day, and the kind of floors that announced every single step you took, regardless of how quietly you were trying to move. Even during the day, there was something about the building that felt heavy and old in a way that was hard to describe. At night, alone, it felt like an entirely different place. I worked with one earbud in and one out so I could hear if anyone came in. I had a routine. Sanctuary first, then the hallways, then the bathrooms, then the upstairs offices and meeting rooms. I had done it enough times that I could move through the building on autopilot. Most nights nothing happened worth mentioning. It was a Wednesday in February when things changed. I was vacuuming the main hallway on the ground floor around 11 p.m. when I heard the piano. It was faint, just a few slow notes, the kind of sound you're not sure you actually heard until it stops, and the silence feels suddenly louder. I cut the vacuum and stood still. Nothing. I waited about 30 seconds, and then told myself it was probably bleed through from whatever was playing in my earbud. I went back to work. 10 minutes later I heard it again. This time, it was clearer. Slow, deliberate notes. Not a melody exactly, but not random either. I pulled both earbuds out and stood in the hallway listening. It was coming from upstairs. I assumed maybe one of the other cleaners had stayed late and hadn't told me, which had happened before. I went up the staircase at the end of the hall and walked toward the music room where the piano was kept. The door was slightly open. I pushed it the rest of the way and looked inside. Empty. Nobody at the piano. Nobody in the room at all. The piano itself sat against the far wall, lid closed, with a thin layer of dust across the keys that didn't look like it had been disturbed recently. I stood in the doorway for a moment trying to make sense of what I had heard. I couldn't. I pulled the door shut and started walking back toward the stairs. That's when the bang happened. It came from the storage area about 15 feet down the hallway to my left. A heavy metallic sound, like something falling off a shelf. I stopped walking and called out into the hallway. No answer. The building went completely, perfectly quiet in the way that old buildings do, where the silence itself has a weight to it. I went back downstairs faster than I had gone up. I told myself it was an old building, and old buildings made sounds, and there was a perfectly normal explanation for all of it. I was almost convinced. Then the lights flickered, just once, for about 2 seconds, and then they came back on steady. I was in the main hallway, halfway between the sanctuary and the exit, when I heard the footsteps directly above me, slow and even, crossing the floor of whatever room sat above that section of hallway. I had just been up there. I had walked every inch of that second floor, and there was nobody up there. I stood in the hallway and listened, and counted the steps. 1, then a pause, then another, the old wood floor creaking under weight with each one. I grabbed my supply cart and started moving toward the front exit. I wasn't running, I was walking quickly, and I was not looking behind me, and I was focused entirely on the front doors at the end of the hall. The piano started again before I reached them, louder this time, a real melody, slow and low, several notes in a deliberate sequence. I stopped walking despite myself and looked back toward the staircase. The upstairs hallway was dark. Nothing moved. The music continued for about 10 seconds, and then stopped mid-note, abruptly, the way a song stops when someone lifts their hands from the keys. I left through the front doors, locked them behind me, went to my car, and sat there for almost 20 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. I called the church coordinator the next morning and told her I wouldn't be coming back. I gave some excuse about my schedule changing. I never told her what actually happened because I didn't think she would believe me, and honestly I wasn't sure I fully believed it myself. I never took another overnight cleaning job after that. Some buildings feel occupied in ways that have nothing to do with whether you can see anyone inside them. That church was one of them.